The year is 2040 and cash is gone. The world has transitioned to government-issued digital credits. You walk by a street performer, tipping them with a scan of your face. All transactions are linked to your digital ID, which is monitored by the government, aided by surveillance cameras, AI, and data analytics. Any wrongdoing and your credits are automatically deducted from your account. Paper and metal money are now illegal. All financial privacy has disappeared. Then there's auto-taxing and programmed inflation. Credits are automatically and unpredictably deducted for tax, and credits become worth less in the future as governments create more out of thin air. The gap between rich and poor has never been wider, as poor citizens struggle to save credits and only the rich have enough credits to store in scarce assets. This is the future of centralized digital currency. But thankfully we have an alternative. In 2009, a pseudonymous programmer, Satoshi Nakamoto, launched Bitcoin, a sovereign financial system. The decentralized money project grew through global collaboration, creating an unstoppable distributed network that authorities could not control, thereby empowering financial freedom to global citizens.
So guys, the technologies are everywhere, so let's get some water with this machine. For example, we get some... What would you like to drink? Let's get some water simply. You press this one. No phone, no cash required. Simply press, scan your face and get your bottle of water.
请面向屏幕。
It's coming! Thank you! That's so convenient. The first time I see such a machine without any devices to pay. Wow!
You lose cash, and this is what we must not let them do. When we lose cash, if we lose cash, and you've only got central bank digital currencies, the computer will know what it is you're trying to do before you even do it, and they will prevent you from doing it. If, for example, they say you can't leave your house more than 5 miles, you try and buy a bottle of water 6 miles from home, you won't be able to. I'm not kidding. That's so many reasons why you should retain cash. It's offensive that the politicians believe that they have a right to all of your information at all times.
It's a race. This is the war. The race is, can they get their Chinese social credit score system installed before enough people wake up and revolt against them? Which one comes first? And so I work with a sense of urgency. I see this as a war of information, and that's a war that I can fight. I'm trying to pump out as much information as I can. I put out about 10 hours of content a week because I believe that we're in a war. I believe with a sense of urgency. I think war will be decided within the next 2 years. And the outcome, as I did a podcast with Peter McCormick, you can check it out. It's called The Battle for the Fate of Humanity. And I believe it's a battle for the fate of humanity. It's the world that my kids are going to have. And we either win and we're free, or we lose and we're in slavery for the rest of humanity.
This definitely seems to be an effort over time to consolidate control over the financial services and banking industry, because ultimately, as I'm sure your audience knows, you know, whoever controls money controls the world, essentially, right? So if you can control financial services and banking, and you have your people dominating that industry, you know, the more dominance they wield over that industry, the more control they exert, right? Whether it's on politicians or the public at large.
What motivates me is that I feel like I have a very strong sense of what will happen if we don't win. Over the course of my lifetime, digital surveillance has gone from negligible to absolutely omnipresent, and CBDCs are coming. We will need Bitcoin as an alternative. I think it's the first issue in quite a long time that unites people around liberty, but positively. They don't frame their political concern as being against something. It's something they can rally around as being for, which is a far, far stronger political message. CBDCs stand for control. I'd rather stand for freedom.
Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is Max and Stacy coming to you from El Salvador, land of the free, home of the Bitcoin. Lots going on. Stacy.
Max, well, you know, we remarked in the last episode that there is a regime change, that the bond apocalypse appears to be upon us. And this means that we will see the crash of the bond market, the end of a multi-decade long bond bubble, the sovereign bond bubble. And in this sort of moment is, of course, a very dangerous time for everybody. And what I want to turn to is a thread from Sean Ono Lennon, where he looks at the dangers of a possible central bank digital currency. And it's really well written, so perfectly said that we're going to read out this whole thing. He says, you may not like Bitcoin, but the central banks of the world have noticed and are concocting their antidote, CBDCs. Inversely, the antidote to CBDCs is Bitcoin. Eventually, there will be only one choice between financial slavery to central authority or self-sovereignty through Bitcoin. So that's his first of a thread. What do you have to say about that, Max?
Right. He's right. You know, the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, is a response to Bitcoin. Bitcoin changed money forever. It disintermediated central banks. It disintermediated all payment systems. And their response is to double down on their surveillance technology and to double down on all the worst features of fiat money by making them even worse. And so this is the beginning of a fight. It's a fight between the old guard, the old regime of fiat money and CBDC versus Bitcoin, which is perfect money.
Right. And the second in his thread, Max, reads this. This is just my opinion, but it's hard to imagine any other outcome. Once the dollar is fully digital, they will have full control. The only asset they will not be able to control will be Bitcoin. That's why this movement is important. Forget crypto bros and NFTs and whether mining uses solar panels or not. This is about the potential for the ruling class to take complete control over their subjects, or inversely, the potential for the people of the world to finally be free. Satoshi made real freedom possible. So real freedom is possible. That's why we always say we're in El Salvador, land of the free, home of the Bitcoin, right? So
that's very close. El Salvador, land of the free, home of the Bitcoin. And Sean Lennon is right, and that you have the attempt by the state and others, the corpocracy, the fusion of state and government, or fascism, which is what a CBDC is. It's fascism on the blockchain, to survey every moment of your life and put it into a huge database and to control you accordingly with social credit scores. If they don't like what you're watching, if they don't like what you're shopping, if they don't like how you're voting, your money will suddenly disappear because you have no control. So it's a total loss of freedom. It's total enslavement. And someone like Sean Lennon, who's an artist, a fine artist, great musician, is, the artists, as we've said many times, they typically are sensitive to these types of changes a little bit ahead of the population. They have their ears and their senses are open to it. And he senses, as many folks do, that this is the last stand for humanity. Bitcoin is the last stand for humanity. It's not for nothing that El Salvador, the savior, is where we made Bitcoin legal tender.
Right. And, I do want to remind you that
I know, it's remarkable. The truth can be unsettling at times, and the reaction by folks can be to cry, to laugh. People have an emotional reaction when confronted with the bare truth. Stacey is obviously moved.
I'm laughing because I matched the shirt.
That's absolutely astronomically not in any fathomable construct of even the metaverse. Have you popped out of the metaverse?
I have popped out of the metaverse. Your shirt pops to the chair. So you're saying that the cherries and the strawberries are floating without a figure of a human being. No, because I saw myself in the monitor and I realized that I'm like...
It's a monochrome, the blue and the blue, right?
I blend in with the chair.
It's just your red pants and a head. There's nothing between your waist and your eyes.
Right.
Except some random strawberries and cherries in the metaverse.
But, so when Italy just had their recent election, remember the unelected officials of Europe were warning already before the vote, because all the polls showed that they would elect this first ever female prime minister in Italy. But the unelected officials did not like that woman, right? So they decided, they pre-warned the citizens, the voters of Italy, that if they voted for that woman, that they could be sanctioned, essentially. So this is the sort of mindset of these unelected officials in these institutions, whether it's the European institutions that run and govern those 27 nations, or it's the central banks, or the Bank of International Settlements, which runs all the central banks. So their mindset is that we basically have a social credit score, and we have some choices that we offer you to make you feel free, when in fact you're not free. You can only select certain things. And if somehow some sort of person like this woman in Italy pops up through there, that we're going to punish you. And these are the same people, this is the same mindset that will control those central bank digital currencies.
Right. And the same elite who have taken control of all media and censor all dissenting views, they have overused various epithets over the years. Because the elites control the media, according to the elites, according to Paul Krugman, according to the New York Times, the Washington Post, everyone is a Nazi. Everyone is a fascist. Everyone is a terrorist. So then what happens is, okay, Italy elects somebody who's completely out of left field, who's not part of the mainstream. And so when these same people, the New York Times, the Washington Post, start using words like Nazi, fascist, etc., everyone's like, you've already outworn your welcome with those words. I mean, you're going to have to think. That's the thing about the New York Times and the Washington Post. They're going to have to think for the first time in 50 years about what they're saying, because the population is not happy and they have the wherewithal to eliminate them.
Well, they have Bitcoin. The people have Bitcoin, and that's what they're choosing, and that's why the battle is there. That's what Sean Lennon is pointing out. It's going to be CBDCs versus Bitcoin. That's the last stand they have, because with Bitcoin, you have individual sovereignty and you have freedom, and they can't take it from you. And you could go wherever you want, including to come here to El Salvador, where we welcome people who are free and free-minded. So, Justin Amash, who was a former, politician in America, was recently warning too about these CBDCs. And he said a digital currency administered by a massive central government is one of the most dangerous developments in history. Finance must be decoupled from the state and decentralized. When the state can turn off your ability to transact with a switch, it controls your whole existence. And so this isn't just theoretical. What Justin Amash was responding to was an actual tweet from the White House. And the White House tweeted this: "A digital dollar may seem far-fetched," they wrote, "but it is not beyond the realm of possibility. Today, the Biden-Harris administration published policy objectives and a technical analysis for a potential U.S. central bank digital currency."
Well, that's why I've always said that Bitcoin is the non-violent form of the guillotine. In other words, right before a major revolution, the elites got a little too uppity and they had to be dealt with. Now, Bitcoin is nonviolent. Bitcoin simply replaces the tool of their terrorism, fiat money, for freedom and individual sovereignty. And so we can look forward to something similar historically. All the wheels of history tend to turn similarly every cycle, and that's what we have to look forward to now. So now we have Bitcoin.
That's what I was going to say, is like, you remember Michael Saylor had mentioned that all your models are broken. But the problem for these academics and these think tanks and the mainstream media and the unelected officials that run many of the global institutions is that they still operate in the model mindset. They have these inputs, and the price is supposed to be something, and they're supposed to always rule the world. But the cycles are the things that keep on continuing. The life cycle of fiat currency, the life cycle of an empire, the Thucydides trap, the life cycle of generations, the fourth turning. We have all these cycles that are continuing, and they always happen, and there's an inevitability to it. But Bitcoin destroyed all the models whereby these elite manage and control that world for all those cycles, like for many successive cycles. But because their models are now destroyed, their ability to control is also destroyed.
That's right. Bitcoin is driving them insane. So instead of beheading them, Bitcoin simply turns them into dribbling psychotic, like the president of the United States, who appears to have no cognitive ability at all, thanks to Bitcoin. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, much more are coming your way.
Bitcoin is accretive. It's not destructive. It will make the world more stable, not less. And it's a store of value, competing with all the other assets for stores of value. And it does not destroy the dollar. Frankly, the dollar is dying by 1,000 cuts at the hands of bureaucrats who are taking us further and further into debt. And Bitcoin is a way to strengthen the whole system by presenting an alternative, a form of hard money tied to energy, decoupled from politics.
If they lose control of fiat currency, if there's not a fiat central bank digital currency, don't they lose all of their power? Isn't that what they're really afraid of? I don't think they care about the economic message you just talked about.
I think that people sometimes forget that we hold the power. We're the ones electing them, and we get the government that we demand. And so they might be proposing ideas like a different kind of blockchain, a CBDC, a programmable political form of money controlled by the state. But that's not the answer. The answer is a decentralized alternative with a capped finite supply that no one can manipulate and that no one can control. And Bitcoin offers that alternative.
CBDC can allow government agencies and private sector players to program, to create smart contract, to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp. By programming CBDC, those money can be precisely targeted for what kind of people can own and what kind of use this money can be utilized. For example, for food.
Bruce Kowalski, your monthly universal basic income has been deposited into your account. For more information, press details. You have been paid 2,000 central bank digital tokens. The following fees are being deducted: accommodation fee, food ration fee, recycling fee, clean energy fee, personal greenhouse gas emissions fee, climate change fee, diversity fee. Your current remaining balance is 5 central bank digital tokens, and if not spent, it will expire in 7 days.
Why are we hearing about central bank digital currencies all of a sudden? It was never talked about before Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is worthless and it needs to be regulated. But now we're creating a competitive response to said worthless thing that needs to be regulated. Just sit with their words for a moment and observe the world. This is why I always say that the corruption of money is the corruption of humanity. You create a system that people can profit from: coercion, compulsion, deception, violence. You've tilted the incentives towards immoral actions. That's who's talking to you. That's Christine Lagarde. That's Jerome Powell. That's every statesman. That's every bureaucrat. Anyone that's representing that the state has any legitimate authority whatsoever is a crony. They're a crook. They're a liar. Do not comply. Reject this shit, right? Embrace the truth. Who is anyone to tell you what to do? You're born free. Be free. Question. Think critically. Question everything that I have to say. Challenge me. Do the same to everyone else. That's how we move forward.
Imagine a digital loonie becoming legal tender. Well, that day is getting closer. A recent survey found most major banks are considering some form of digital currency within the next 6 years. 3 research teams have produced proposals for the Bank of Canada. As Eric Sorensen reports, this could fuel the digital economy.
Every day, more Canadians pay digitally, and fewer businesses need this: a cash drawer stuffed with bills. Canadians are among the most cash-free spenders in the world. So, is it time for digital currency? The Bank of Canada isn't promoting the idea, but believes it needs to be ready.
Currency is a core part of the Bank of Canada's mandate. For several years, the Bank of Canada has been analyzing what circumstances might lead Canada to decide to issue a digital currency.
The Bank of Canada is now studying proposals from 3 sets of university experts for a homegrown digital currency. Formulas for how to spend with the anonymity of cash without using cash. It could work like this. Through an app on a cell phone, a user sets up a secure e-wallet, it's authenticated through a government agency, and it's ready to go. The merchant establishes a digital transaction to accept the funds. But a critical new step in between, what the U of T and York team calls a whitelist, where the transaction is not only authenticated, but will ensure customer information is not passed on, just the money. Privacy is paramount.
We believe that the Canadian government has an obligation to give people a way to protect their privacy and give them, in particular, because payments are so central for commercial interactions.
The currency would require measures against too much privacy to prevent money laundering and tax evasion. And while cash payments are becoming a smaller part of the economy, the central bank says it wouldn't abandon communities not connected to high-tech commerce.
That means, for one thing, ensuring that remote and marginalized communities are not left out of any new way to pay for goods and services.
The so-called CBDC wouldn't be a direct counter to Bitcoin, which is an investment currency, rather than a cash-equivalent consumer currency. But Canada cannot sit back, say experts, as other countries like China unveil digital currencies.
Could cash be phased out in the next 20 years? Governments around the world are in a race to develop their own version of a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. But what even is that? A dollar in cash is actually very different from a dollar in your bank account. Every commercial bank repurposes up to 99% of the money that you deposit into loans. And we know how well that system works depending on what country you're in. With a CBDC, you wouldn't need to rely on a commercial bank to hold your money, but the issuing federal bank instead. In the short term, this means that the government would essentially cut out most middlemen when it comes to payment processing, banking fees, and the like. In the long term, it also means more power gets transferred to the state to monitor and control every one of your transactions. In China, they already have this system, and if I made a video like this there, my account would already be frozen.
The European Central Bank recently said that Bitcoin is on the road to irrelevance. But here's the truth. Central banks are the ones on the road to irrelevance. Bitcoin disrupts their power. It makes them irrelevant. It's no wonder they hate it. The more people use Bitcoin, the less we need central banks. Join the hundreds of millions of people globally already using Bitcoin as money and free yourself from the financial matrix of central bank currency tyranny. Subscribe now.
But, you know, if it's mandated to use CBDCs, then people will use them. And so that's just, you know, application of the violence of the state. In the Eastern Caribbean, we saw another cautionary tale, which is that the maintenance of the technical infrastructure is a big challenge.
Welcome back to another video. In this one I want to cover Nick Bhatia's excellent book Layered Money, which came out this year, and I actually have it right here. And in the book he walks us from gold and dollars to Bitcoin and central bank digital currencies. So we first dive into a bit of history to understand how money is layered already and why Bitcoin is built on a very similar construct. The easiest way to understand layered money are gold and gold certificates from 1928. Gold is held in central banks and gold certificates are used for easier payment, and they can be exchanged with each other. In this case, gold is the first layer money and the certificates are the second layer money. Nick built the layers in a way so that the first layer is always the one on the top, in this example gold, and new layers are added from there. The gold certificates made out of paper are just a representation of an exact amount of gold. This is also the distinction between money and currency. Gold is money, the second layer paper certificates are currency. With it comes counterparty risk. All second layer monies are IOUs, or promises to pay first layer money. They all have something called counterparty risk. Trust in counterparties is required for our financial system to operate, or else we'd all still be using gold and silver coins for every single transaction. Here we can also make the first Bitcoin comparison. Bitcoin as a base layer is free of this counterparty risk. But back to our monetary history. What happened is that first layer money emerged as a better way to store value over longer periods of time, and second layer money emerged as a better way to transact because it was more flexible to use than coinage. However, there were always actors that tried, and sometimes successfully tried, to monopolize the issuance of second layer money by owning all the first layer money. In 1609, for example, the Bank of Amsterdam's first order of business was to outlaw cashiers and their notes and mandate all gold and silver coins throughout the city be deposited at the bank. The Bank of Amsterdam was able to successfully monopolize the issuance of second layer money by eliminating public access to the first layer money. By suspending convertibility to first layer money, the Bank of Amsterdam proved that precious metals wasn't necessarily required to operate a monetary and financial system. But one thing became clear later on. Gold is money, everything else is credit. JP Morgan to United States Congress in 1912. Keeping that in mind, it's quite astounding what happened to the Federal Reserve, the US central bank. Gold represented 84% of the Federal Reserve's assets upon its founding. Today, for reference, gold represents less than 1% of the Fed's assets. Gold was replaced by US Treasuries as the first layer. Remember, gold is money, everything else is credit. In 1933, Roosevelt ordered what the Bank of Amsterdam ordered 300 years earlier. Executive Order 6102 instructed all gold coin, gold bullion, and certificates to be delivered to the government, thereby eliminating people from first layer money, making it illegal with up to 10 years in prison. So at this point, the pyramid basically had gold and US Treasuries at the top, followed by the US dollar and second layer money. But what about other currencies? Amidst the global currency war, the dollar emerged as the cleanest, dirty shirt in the laundry of global currencies. The US dollar became the world reserve currency, and through the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, every other currency was now third layer money. However, the Bretton Woods system failed because nations depleted the gold reserves of the Fed, and the Fed kept printing dollars without any established reserve ratio. Me, and also Nick, just wanted to run you through a little bit of history to show that layered money is not a new concept. It's not something that came new with Bitcoin, it's something we historically always had. Historically, and also currently, we have a layered system with US and other treasuries and gold held by central banks at the top, followed by payment rails like FedWire and ACH, and then on the fourth layer or so we have the transactional layers that we all use, like credit cards and PayPal. The point that I want to make here is that the base layer of a monetary system is usually not the layer with the fastest transaction speeds. Quite the opposite, the base layer offers a final settlement. You can assume Bitcoin transactions to be final after about an hour, and that on a global scale. It's by far the fastest global final settlement we ever had. Not being able to buy coffee with Bitcoin is something that critics usually like to state to prove that Bitcoin has no use case. And yeah, to be honest, recording a coffee transaction on tens of thousands of nodes around the world is not really the prime example for why a decentralized, censorship-resistant money makes sense. This has led to widely used, albeit misinformed, criticism of Bitcoin. The network is too slow to function properly as a medium of commerce. In reality, first-layer Bitcoin transactions are not designed for instant commerce. They are designed to keep an entire global network of peers in perpetual agreement on the status of the Bitcoin ledger. As we previously learned, the base layer of a monetary system is usually good for storing value and not for a medium of exchange. This is also why comparing Bitcoin to credit cards is utterly useless. Credit cards are actually much slower when it comes to the final settlement of transactions. They just offer credit with a counterparty risk in the meantime. A merchant trusts his customers that the credit card transaction will eventually settle, but it's not instant at all. Hal Finney, the first recipient of a Bitcoin transactions, knew that Bitcoin will be layered very early on. Bitcoin itself cannot scale to have every single financial transaction in the world be broadcast to everyone and included in the blockchain. There needs to be a secondary level of payment systems which is lighter weight and more efficient. This is where things like the Lightning Network come into play that allow instant and worldwide transactions at pretty much zero cost and can scale to millions of transactions per second, much more than Visa for example. I must say though that I'm still a little bit of a Lightning skeptic. I think it's the best scaling option we currently have that doesn't compromise the decentralization and security of the base layer. However, it has a user experience problem in my eyes, as opening channels and filling them with liquidity before actually using them is super counterintuitive. We will see if there will be another layer on top that fixes this somehow. Also, Lightning is still missing a bit of a killer app, which is something that could potentially change with Strike Global. But as I said, I believe it's still the best scaling option available and much better than aiming to settle every micropayment on the base layer like some cryptocurrencies want to. I'm curious about your opinion on this, so let me know what you think about this whole scaling and medium of exchange topic. Now, back to our layered money system. Nick makes the point that you can also think of alternative cryptocurrencies as part of the layered system, because they have a price relationship with Bitcoin. So, similar to the Bretton Woods system, you could think of Bitcoin acting as the base price for other digital currencies. And the layered system of Bitcoin is actually wider than that already. You have exchanges and trusts that offer a second layer Bitcoin while they keep the keys. You have stablecoins that reflect the value of fiat currencies like the US dollar, and at some point central bank digital currencies. The plain truth about Bitcoin is that nobody controls it. It has become the first ever government-free, universally accessible digital currency. And for these reasons, all currencies in the purely digital realm will face price discovery in BTC terms. This means that all digital currencies, from cryptocurrencies to central bank digital currencies, will be measured in BTC, just like the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 mandated all currencies be measured in USD. The layer pyramid is actually much more complex by now, and we can only guess what layers will be added in a world in which money is now software.